Well, good evening, folks. Welcome once again on a rainy Tuesday evening. You're listening to Keeping It Real. Today is Tuesday, the 21st of August, 2018. You're listening to episode number 10. That's right, episode number 10 of Keeping It Real. Tonight's big headliner: what happened with the Martinicans? That's right, folks. It's gonna be hot and sizzling here tonight. I just had to get everything lined up because those of you who are not paying attention, I'm gonna be here to clarify things a bit for you. Just like to recount a little experience late this afternoon, earlier this evening, when I felt an earthquake. Started off as I thought it was my chair moving around, and then it just started getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and then the monitor on my desk began to shake and the building began to sway because I was way up there on the 5th floor, and I was just about beginning to scream like a little girl.
Don't try that. Don't try to put the blame on girls. Boys scream too.
I was just at the point of running out of my office, but everything subsided at the most opportune time to prevent me from doing anything of the sort. But information online, somebody just messaged me and said they felt it. So a lot of people commented on Facebook all over St. Lucia, and according to the UE seismology department, the earthquake was centered, actually was a 6.8 if I recall correctly.
Well, I tell you,
centered in Venezuela near Carúpano.
Yeah. This afternoon we were at home sitting down discussing some business and that. Family business, and then the bed started to shake, and lo and behold, one of my aunts was on the phone.
You thought it was a Jean Gagé or something on your bed?
Like
a broad daylight like that?
Yeah, I really know. My daughter felt it first, actually, and we just stopped, and then realized the whole room was moving. But what was interesting was that at that time, one of my aunts, who was here from Barbados, she was on the phone to someone in Barbados, and they were telling her the earthquake was in Barbados.
Oh, they were feeling it.
So they were feeling it as well in Barbados. Yeah. And then I immediately got on my ham radio, and I got onto some guys in Trinidad, and they said it was ridiculously terrible.
Yeah, because that's very close to Carúpano over there.
And some recordings say it was a 7.3.
Really?
Yeah, 7.3. As a matter of fact,
that's a big one.
Right in front of me here, I'm looking at the CSME, the seismic site, and it says 7.3 offshore,
really?
Venezuela. Sucre, Venezuela.
Estado Sucre, that's a state in Venezuela.
I didn't question it, so
and the capital is Cumaná.
Well, yeah, if you say so. 160 kilometers west of Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago. 101 kilometers east of La Asunción. You know that place too. You're a Spanish fella. and then 32 kilometers east of Carúpano. Well, whatever.
There's a very nice radio station out of Radio Carúpano.
So it was all over, but it was felt up as far as Dominica, I understand. And it was quite a shake. One fella said in Trinidad it lasted over 2 minutes, but I don't think I don't see the time, but I knew it shook for a while because my brother and my daughter and my wife were there, and we were watching everything moving and wondering whether we should run or we should stop, Anyhow, that's it.
Well, folks, where do I begin tonight? Because, these days there's much...
You're shaking up things today?
These days there's so much regurgitation of issues that dead already, man. That dead already. That's the past. And somehow, some brilliant scholars and some satellites out there seem to have a knack of resurrecting the past. But you know, what do they say about the past? Those who don't know the past or the history are doomed to repeat it. But I think it's very important, and particularly when issues come out and they're not resolved or clarified properly. And this week we heard the rumblings. Well, from last week Thursday, when we had the visit of the Venezuelan contingent or the Venezuelan entourage who came to St. Lucia for security discussions, and of course the visa situation was on the minds of everyone as well. And there's been a lot of noise, and the week before last I also addressed the visa implementation by the government of St. Lucia on Venezuela. And you know, it is shocking to me the ridiculous condemnations and the ridiculous explanations that some people have put out there to discredit the government of St. Lucia, and particularly the Prime Minister, in taking or implementing these measures to secure St. Lucia. And you know, it's really amazing how people too often forget what they've said. And in 2003, Canada implemented visa restrictions, or requiring St. Lucians traveling to Canada to obtain a visa to get to that country. And I think we're all very well aware of the reasons for that. The reason for Canada taking such action, that was because of the abuse of the refugee facility to get residency in Canada. And a number of St. Lucians had filed under that option to get residency in Canada. But folks, if we look at the size of Canada and its population of approximately 33 million, somewhere around there, 35 million, and we look at the size of St. Lucia, one of the states, I mean, there are farms in Canada that are almost larger than St. Lucia, right? And even if you were to drop into Canada by some miraculous measure, every single person residing in St. Lucia at this time, hardly anyone would notice. St. Lucians would just be absorbed into the large country that is Canada. So, as far as numbers go, 180,000 people from St. Lucia is not a big deal. Far less in the United States. Okay? But the concerns that this government has, and the Prime Minister has been taken out of context, and I'm very much convinced deliberately by a number of no-gooders whose sole intention is to discombobulate, to confound and confuse everyone who is hearing the information from the government and the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. And I have here, folks, a statement, and it's actually on the government of St. Lucia's website. You could search for it if you want, because, you know, I give you the information and you can verify. I don't just spew nonsense over here and expect you to believe me just because, you know, I'm the great Nobby on Keeping It Real. You know, just being funny for a while, but you know what I'm saying. You can verify. And it's a statement made by Dr., of course, Kenny Anthony, who was the Prime Minister at the time. And it is dated on the archived St. Lucia government website. It is dated Thursday, September the 18th, 2003. And I'm just going to read a little bit of it for you so you can hear the perspective, because I'm going to develop this argument, my argument, on the stance that certain persons out there, particularly the St. Lucia Labour Party, on the Alan Chasney administration's move to impose visa regulations on Venezuela. There goes. Prime Minister Honorable Dr. Kenny Anthony has described as alarming and a source of deep shame as St. Lucia now ranks the second on the list of Caribbean countries making claims of refugee status to gain entry into Canada. Now, the headline to this story is St. Lucians making refugee claims, alarming and a source of deep shame. Dr. Kenny Anthony considers the actions of St. Lucians being involved in, for all intents and purposes, unlawful or criminal activity, because it's a crime to file a false declaration, to make false representation. During a press statement last evening, so I guess that would be September the 17th, 2003, Dr. Anthony stated categorically to the individuals who are submitting these outrageously false refugee claims that they are not only hurting their fellow countrymen by their dishonesty, but also themselves. Dr. Anthony is denouncing the action made and made it abundantly clear that the St. Lucia government will not shield anyone who engages in this type of activity and will assist the Canadian authorities to root out this unacceptable practice. It has been reported that these individuals are being assisted with their claims by unscrupulous lawyers and consultants who charge up to 5,000 Canadian dollars to process these claims. Those who apply may gain time, but ultimately the applications fail, with the prospect that the applicants are deported and denied re-entry into Canada. Prime Minister Anthony advised all St. Lucians who wish to acquire landed immigrant status in Canada to seek the assistance and advice of the OACS High Commission in Ottawa and the Canadian High Commission in Trinidad and Barbados on the proper procedure for immigration to Canada, for migration to Canada. I would like, and quote, I guess this is from Dr. Anthony, I would like to remind all St. Lucians that we have an excellent relationship with the government and people of Canada. Canada has been a dedicated and loyal partner in St. Lucia's development. For many years, the Canadian government has committed tremendous financial and technical resources to this country. We would not like to see this mutually beneficial relationship deteriorate as a result of the unscrupulous practices of a few. We publicly denounce the reprehensible actions of these persons involved in influencing young St. Lucians to apply for refugee status. Now, folks, in reading or in listening to this statement made by Dr. Kenny Anthony, there is inadvertently an acknowledgement of the fact that St. Lucians are engaging in unlawful practices in Canada. Not violent acts, not dealing drugs, not running guns, not smuggling children, not human trafficking, but simply in applying under false pretenses. And as a result of that, folks, as a result of that, the great Canada, up there in the great white north, 35 million people, one of the largest. Are you spraying me, man? You know, this This guy is spraying insect spray in air.
I'm doing a Rick on you. I'm only kidding. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
Freshening up the industry.
That's not what you use to freshen up, my friend. But anyway, folks, just getting you in on a little bit of what happens in here. So if you hear anything happen to me, I'm down with anything. The evidence is there, okay?
But it's a serious point you're making there, Norbert, because I remember that very well. And to think that people would go up there and try to blacken the name of St. Lucia with the refugee status, when they have a good life down here.
Yeah, but hold on. I'm just getting warm. I got a message here on WhatsApp. Tuned in from Babono. Hey, Babono, what's going on? I know who you are. Hope you got the whole posse listening tonight. Right. So, folks, the Canadian government decided that because there were a number of St. Lucians filing falsely to get residence in Canada, filing under the refugee status category, that as a result of that, and as a result of supplying a number of false documents, that they would implement a visa requirement to travel to Canada. First time ever to Canada for St. Lucia. No violent crimes, nothing of the sort, just applications. But you're telling me, this is the thing you have to consider. You're telling me that St. Lucia's Prime Minister and the government, the cabinet of ministers, after evaluating all the evidence, after receiving all the police briefings, the security briefings, the intelligence reports, the reports from other islands in the region, the reports from the regional security system of which we are a member, after considering all of that, that the government was not in its right thinking to protect the citizens of St. Lucia, that the government of St. Lucia was not duty bound after taking the oath of office to secure the borders of St. Lucia? You tell me this is a far stretch of the imagination when today on the news and during the past few days, a number of countries in South and Central America are beginning to take measures to stem the tide of Venezuelan refugees and criminals. Now, I'm not saying all Venezuelans are that way, but because of the high profile that those persons have been involved in survival, it is necessary to protect themselves. And somebody says they're tuned in from Darren Sammy Stadium. Well, good luck to St. Lucia tonight. The St. Lucia Stars, good luck. Now, folks, when you look at the facts regarding this case, but before I even go into the numbers, in November last year, there was a crime symposium held at the ministry at Union, right? And at that crime symposium, one of the speakers, in fact, the very first speaker, was our current leader of the opposition, former deputy leader of the St. Lucia Labour Party, and deputy to Dr. Kenny Anthony. Philip J. Pierre had this to say at the crime symposium in November 2017.
We live in changing times. We need to have a serious and frank and open discussion on several things. Crime is a multifaceted social problem which must be carefully studied. Causes range from poverty, drugs, family conditions, depression, and other social and mental disorders.
Pause that right there. Now, you heard, just go back about 10 seconds, because what Philip J. Pierre is saying is very important, and I'd like you to listen to it again.
Problem, which must be carefully studied. Causes range from poverty, drugs, family conditions, depression, and other social and mental disorders.
Pause right there. Folks, because of the economic situation in Venezuela right now, because of the skyrocketing inflation, because of the unrest in Venezuela, and lest you forget that St. Lucia had a number of students there who were balling to high murder to get to hell out of there because things were rough. So you remember that? So if the seriousness of crime, of poverty, of all of those reasons that Philip J. Pierre stated are responsible for contributing to crime in St. Lucia to such a point that there was a need, a cry, and it was responded to with a crime symposium at which Philip J. Pierre himself spoke. At which he spoke. And you're telling me that if these very same circumstances exist outside of St. Lucia and are causing an influx of refugees to head north, south, east, and west, that we should not be concerned? That for their mere survival, too many people in Venezuela are resorting to the sale or the trafficking of drugs across borders, to the shipping or to the exchange or the barter of weapons, of firearms, and this should not be a concern to the government of St. Lucia? I mean, that would be incredible. Continue with that Philip J. Pierre address.
Crime is the result of a breakdown in law and order at all levels, not only in the places that we call ghettos. We must be truthful. A critical starting point is that there is a clear signal that we are prepared to be serious in fighting crime.
Isn't the government showing that it is serious in fighting crime by taking measures locally and also to stem any foreign involvement in crime? You know, folks, soon after, or whether it was before or after, there was a seminar at that same union, ministry at union, on human trafficking. And the argument is, in St. Lucia, I mean, you would expect that persons who have been in government, who have been exposed to the security briefings, who get briefings from Interpol and all over the place, would be a little more genuine or not as disingenuous as they are by stating absolute nonsense as justification for their condemnation of the visa requirements set up for Venezuelans. Folks, human trafficking is a very serious issue around the world now. And the Caribbean is no exception to the rule. In fact, there's been lots of information. In fact, because many people were not trained to identify the signs of human trafficking, it was overlooked. It was not seen. It was not on the radar. But a lot of what's going on in Venezuela right now and being exported, and this is not a guess, this is a fact, is being exported prostitution and human trafficking. So now, the reason why I bring up this point as a little aside is because the argument made by some out there is that, well, the persons who are coming in illegal anyway. Drug dealers and arms dealers are not going to look for a visa so they could come in legally. They're going to come in illegally on the beaches and on those go-fast boats. Oh my God, y'all are crazy. Visas are not going to stop that. Yes, visas are not going to stop persons coming into St. Lucia illegally. But the persons who want to set up base in St. Lucia, the persons who want to establish contacts in St. Lucia, the persons who want to minimize the threat to them being in St. Lucia will come in on a commercial flight, will come in through Martinique and establish ties with persons in St. Lucia to set up their criminal enterprises. Most of the time, the person involved in these activities, in human trafficking, in shipments and whatever, travel regularly, legally, to set up their contacts, to set up the market, to organize. So when you set up visas for those nationals, of whatever country it is, Venezuela in this instance, what you are going to be able to is to monitor the people who are coming in. Like they always say, and like you've heard in the movies, follow the money. Follow the money. But you know, folks, there are some people, for some, whatever reason it is, want to decry security measures, prudent security measures. And just today on CNN, just to give you more context, CNN is reporting that the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, warned that inflation could hit 1,000,000% in Venezuela this year. 1,000,000%. And today is the day, or was it yesterday, that the Venezuelan Bolivar, which is now called the new Bolivar Soberano, which is the sovereign Bolivar, the currency, one Bolivar, here's the magic that they concocted, that one Bolivar now is worth 100,000 bolivars from yesterday. The new currency. Just imagine that. So $1 was worth 149, the last time I gave you the statistics, was worth 149,000 bolivars or bolivares. Today, that 149,000 bolivars to a US dollar would be 1 bolivar and 49 centavos. Un bolívar 49 centavos. So, has your money just all of a sudden overnight become 100,000 times more valuable? What has changed? You know, that's the fuzzy maths that's going on there. You know, yesterday it was 149,000. Now it's 149 to a US dollar. Less than a St. Lucian dollar. A Eastern Caribbean dollar. So you figure that out for yourself. But there are some other alarming statistics that support the concerns of the Alan Chasney administration and which should clearly be of concern for the other islands in the Caribbean. Let me give you some figures here. Okay? In 2015, the number of Venezuelans who were in Colombia, that's west of Venezuela, across the border, was 48,714. Right? And if you want, I'll tell you exactly where that information is. It's on a website called migration.dataportal.org. migration.dataportal.org. So you could go check it out for yourself. In 2015, there were 48,714 Venezuelans who migrated to Colombia. In 2017, just 2 years later, in the midst or at the height of all what has been happening in Venezuela. And of course, these are figures for 2017. At the end of 2018, we'll get the figures for 2018. In 2017, 2 years later, from 48,714 persons who had fled to Colombia, the number was 600,000. Can you believe that? 600,000. To the Dominican Republic, in 2015, 5,417 Venezuelans. 2 years later, in 2017, the numbers skyrocketed to 25,872. To Brazil, 2015, the number was 3,425. In 2017, 35,000 Venezuelans fled to Brazil. Here's another alarming one. To Peru, in 2015, 2,351. In 2017, 26,239. Even to Spain, in 2015, the numbers were 165,895. In 2017, 208,333. Do I need to go on giving more? Okay. Let me give you one more. To Panama. It's just countries just right around. 2015, 9,883. 2017, 36,365. Are you concerned yet? Are you concerned, folks? Now, in fact, before I go any further, let me have you listen, because there was a visit to St. Lucia. In fact, before we even get to that, you know, in the last broadcast where I discussed this very same issue, I said that St. Lucia is a sovereign country. And you don't have to give an explanation to anyone. The decision that you take for your country is your prerogative, whether anybody likes it or not. Well, somebody felt that they should throw out there that somebody who I felt was more intelligent and more capable made a silly, or words to that effect, statement that St. Lucia is a sovereign country and that being sovereign was not the issue at all. Damn right it is. It is. Because being sovereign, we can take the decisions that we need to take to secure our borders, to secure our citizens. And being sovereign allows you to consider the evidence. Because Martinique can't take those measures for us. Barbados, Mia Motley can't take those measures for us. Because she is not sovereign to us. We are sovereign to ourselves. Because we're independent now. And we have to do what it takes to secure our citizens. And anybody who doesn't like that, that's their problem. If they have a relationship with the Venezuelan government or the system of governance or the isms that are espoused down there, that's your business. That's your business. But you have a government in office now, which was elected by a majority of the people of St. Lucia, to safeguard. We have a call. Let's see who that is. Thank you for calling, Keeping It Real. Good night.
Yeah, good evening.
Yes, sir.
I've been listening to you very, very carefully, yeah?
Yes.
You have mentioned a number of countries where Venezuelans have gone to. But you know, strangely, I have not heard any country within the OECS, within CARICOM, where Venezuelans have fled to.
Is this your first time listening to the show?
It's not my first time
Okay.
listening. I'm listening to you
On the
tonight.
last show.
I'm talking about tonight.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on. Okay. I
tonight?
understand that, but I'm going to say that on the last show, that I mentioned that in Trinidad, the number that has been put out there of illegals is about 180,000. It's the 100 and something thousand in Trinidad.
Understand that clearly.
Yes.
Because Trinidad is very close.
10 miles. 10 miles.
And let me tell you,
Yeah.
we all understand the problem in Venezuela.
Yes.
We all also understand. And if you take it in relation to Cuba, when the Americans put pressure on Cuba, most of those Cubans went into America.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I am saying, right, that our problem and some of the problem that I had with the Prime Minister's statement when he gave his reason.
What's the statement? Please give me what your argument is.
When he alluded to the fact that there were criminals and a lot of criminal activities in St. Lucia related to Venezuelans.
Are you saying that is not true?
I am not saying that it is
Are
not
you saying
true.
okay? Are you?
Listen
Are you
to me,
hold
I
on,
am
hold
not-
on, hold
let
on,
me
hold
finish
on,
my
hold on,
conversation.
wait. It's an interaction here. Are you also saying that the Prime Minister is not privy to security briefings from the police and other security agencies?
Yes, I understand all of that. I
Yes.
also understand, right? And I also heard the Prime Minister saying to the journalists, go do your research.
Yes.
They made some research. They came out with some figures. It has not been refuted.
What
Right.
figures? You need to tell me what you're referring to.
Let's see. You did not hear, so I did not hear.
No. I'm no. You're making
mean,
a number.
when
Hold
he
on,
said-
hold
when
on,
he
caller.
said that
Hold
the
on,
crime- when he said-
caller,
listen, let me
caller.
tell you.
Hold on. They can't hear you. I've turned down the volume to you, so you need to listen for a bit. A number of statements have been made regarding Venezuela, the visas, and all. We're here having a discussion. I've quoted a number of specific instances and facts regarding this situation. You're mentioning figures. For us to have a logical, or for you to make your point, you have to quote what those figures are.
Concerning the criminal activity within Venezuelans in St. Lucia, right? I don't think that all the crimes that we have in St. Lucia, especially those gun crimes, it's not proven that the weapons and all the others. Now, I do not want to go into this. Because
But hold on, no, caller,
My point-
come
my
on,
point-
come
the
on.
point- I do not want to.
You
I do
cannot
not
make
want
an
to lose-
argument and say you don't want to
I
get
do not
into
want
it.
to
That
lose-
doesn't make
I do not want
sense.
to lose the point that I'm trying to make.
Write it down.
The point that I'm trying to make, right, is that, right?
Yes.
We are making, I have no problem with the visa requirement. I have no problem with the visa requirement. I have a problem when you say, right, that crime, that you place it because of crime. I'll tell you something, huh? The Venezuelans
But that's a
can
very
get here.
vague statement you're making.
It is
In fact,
vague, it is vague,
hold
but
on.
the crime-
Slow
but
down a
that's
little
what the
bit,
Prime
man.
Minister
Slow
said.
down.
You may be trying to polish it up now, and I understand that.
Now you jump into conclusions.
No, I want to understand that.
Okay,
Listen, I want to
but give me
understand
an
what I heard
opportunity.
from the Prime Minister. Well, not what I'm hearing from you.
Caller.
It's what I heard from the Prime Minister.
Caller.
And I know
But
exactly
you
what
you
you're
need
trying to do
but
to
if
me.
you're saying the Prime Minister made certain statements, you need to state what those are.
That the main reason why he placed his visa requirement was solely from his mouth that it was because of the crime level involving Venezuelans in St. Lucia.
So let me clarify. So let me give you my perspective on what the Prime Minister said. Okay? The Prime Minister said, first and foremost, that a number of crimes, in fact, last year, we had a record number of homicides in St. Lucia. Do you agree with me on that?
Yes.
Right. We had 60. Of those 60, the Prime Minister said that 40 were gang and drug related. Are you with me on that there so
Yes,
far?
Go ahead.
Right. The concerns that the Prime Minister had was that a lot of those gang homicides involved or were over drugs and involved illegal firearms. Is that correct so far?
Go ahead.
Right. So I would suppose that you agree with me.
Go ahead.
Right.
I'm saying to
okay,
you,
hold on.
What you're saying, I'm listening to you.
Right.
I'm not
Also,
agreeing with anything.
this, as a result of the high rate of homicides last year and the increase in crime, the concerns that all St. Lucians have been expressing regarding crime, right? As a result of that, in November last year, and I just played a clip where the leader of the opposition was a speaker, there was a symposium on crime. So if we have this much concern locally, and we see what is happening in Trinidad, what is happening with Brazil, what is happening with Colombia, what is happening internally in Venezuela, and what has already happened in St. Lucia with Venezuelans being involved in crime, with Venezuelans being deported, with Venezuelans being busted out of prison. You remember that? When they opened high caliber fire on the Leiff facility. Do you remember that one? Hold on, I ain't finished yet, man. Lower his volume. I ain't finished yet, because you started me up, and some of you people deliberately ignore the facts, and when it is presented to you all, you deliberately not want to hear it and keep repeating the same old nonsense in the face of facts. Bring his volume back up. Right?
I will answer you on another radio station.
Which other radio station?
You
hear now?
No, I'll find another avenue, because you're not being entertaining. You do not want.
I'm not entertaining. I'm stating the facts.
You want to make your.
Have a good night. You're not running the show here, okay? This is not one of the shows that you will call and continue to spew whatever you want, regardless of the facts and the evidence that is presented to you. Okay? That is not going to happen here, and we have made that very clear from the get-go.
It is important for us to understand that the police are not servants of the government.
Yes. Now, caller, and to the listeners out there, the fact remains that at one point, fairly recently, there were 13 Venezuelan nationals in prison in St. Lucia. That was just quoted on the news recently. For a country that is so far away, these individuals were not in prison for selling barbecue chicken. They were not in prison for selling mangoes. So you do the math. And I think out of an abundance of caution, the St. Lucia government, getting the security briefings, knowing full well the situation that exists in Venezuela, it is indisputable or undisputable. Right? Having all of this information, having the information regarding illegal activities on our shores, having the information about drugs transiting St. Lucia, some of it ending up here, going to wherever else, the Prime Minister, as his responsibility to the people of St. Lucia, thought that the logical thing to do was to implement measures to curb anything coming from Venezuela. Now, nobody's saying that it's going to be a magic bullet or a perfect solution, but you have to put the measures in place. Now, let me let you understand something. Ecuador implemented some measures either today or yesterday. And do you want to know what the police force in St. Lucia is? About 1,000, give or take, right? 1,000 police officers in St. Lucia, 1,100, whatever it is. It's not much different to that. Ecuador has a police population of 160,000 police officers, right? The military has more. Colombia has even more. Brazil has more. I don't need to go to get those figures now. They're high. And if those countries have serious issues with the Venezuela situation and refugees and crime being associated with that. What do you think about St. Lucia? Shouldn't we be preemptive? Shouldn't we shake up the Venezuelans and say, hey, you know, you got to start doing something, and we're serious about this, so do something. Now, you see the kind of arguments that people make. But and then again, I gave the example earlier about the Canadians. Look at Canada. Just for applying for refugee status, not violent crime. Nothing of the sort. Just filing falsely. They impose visas on St. Lucia. Was that all? Was there any reason why they did? Since you or some other people may believe that was extreme, but maybe you should ask the former Prime Minister of St. Lucia why the Canadians were so heavy-handed on St. Lucia. Ask him. Ask him. Ask him. Had the Canadians communicated with the St. Lucia government on multiple occasions? Had they been responded to, or had they not been responded to officially? These are questions that you need to ask to find out what's going on. Right? Now, what I want you to listen to, since everybody wants to talk about what the government is doing, and Alan Chasney, you know, once they hear that word, some people go into an epileptic fit of sorts. Alan Chow, oh my gosh, they got to find some reason to attack anything he says, any action he takes, any policy he implements, anything at all that passes even close to Alan Chasney. Oh, some people lose it. So now, the Venezuelan ambassador to St. Lucia, Leiff Escalona, was on another talk show last week Wednesday. And the Venezuelan ambassador had this to say.
Against the...
Let's start that over. Let's start that over so you get the full...
Firearms and everything. Against the... This is the reason of the government. Against the traffic of drugs and firearms.
That's not the beginning.
And this is the reason of the government.
She's the Venezuelan
right now.
ambassador.
And we have to respect the decision of the government because you are a sovereign.
Pause that right there. Pause that right there. You hear the Venezuelan ambassador being a diplomat and understanding that regardless of whether they agree with it or not, that St. Lucia is a sovereign state. And the St. Lucia government has a responsibility to its people to put the measures in place to secure its borders and for the safety of the people of St. Lucia.
I am lost to find out what the caller is objecting to. You know, I'm really lost because he's a frequent caller to this program. And for him to come and object to this, it really tells you that he's so one-sided, he's blind to what has been said.
He's deaf.
And deaf? Well, sometimes it's not enough. She's probably blind too. Anyway, we have a caller.
Good evening. Thank you for calling. Okay, that one's gone. So what I want you to do is to start over that clip with the Venezuelan ambassador
at the beginning. Okay, here we go.
We have to work against the traffic of drugs and firearms and everything. And this is the reason of the government right now. And we have to respect the decision of the government because you are a sovereignty policies and it's a decision. But for the most important for us, the most important issue is to work in this matter. For this situation, our President, Nicolas Maduro, and our Minister of Security in Venezuela, we established we try to work with the government of St. Lucia in this worry because we understand it's a very important policy in St. Lucia, but we prefer to work on that, not to just to.
Okay, that was last week Wednesday, Venezuelan Ambassador Leiff Escalona talking on the government's decision. Good evening. Thanks for calling Keeping It Real.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Ellis. To all due respect to you, I was trying to develop my own point. I was not being disrespectful, but as from tonight, I will not listen to the radio station anymore. Have a blessed night.
Good night, sir. Okay, so moving right along. You see, you have the people who are affected by this new visa policy of the government of St. Lucia, who are respectful, who understand the sovereignty of St. Lucia and its right to implement visa requirements and any other measures that it deems fit. They did not condemn the government. They say they understand the concerns of the government and that they're willing to work with the government of St. Lucia. Good evening. Thanks for calling Keeping It Real.
Hi, good evening.
Good night.
Okay, just the last remark you made about not you people are he's blind. You're using the word blind loosely, as if it's only people that are blind. It's literally people that maybe are blind, but there are people that can see, and they literally cannot see anything. They have no kind of vision. Now, I listened to you spoke about the thing. I listened to all the countries in Bolivia, Panama, Brazil, Colombia, all of these countries. But it sounds like the Venezuelans are fleeing to places where they feel more comfortable, where they speak their language. I didn't really hear you mention any Caribbean countries.
Did you not hear me mention St. Lucia? Did you not hear me mention the 13 who were in prison here? Did you not hear me mention...
No, you know the 13 in prison, there were two contradictory reports on television. One said 13, and then up to tonight on DBS, they said it was at its lowest.
Yes.
At one point, they gave a thing of...
Yes, it's at its lowest today. It's at its lowest today. That doesn't mean there were not 13 at one point.
But then they also named what they were there for. And I don't think...
What were they there for? Stealing barbecue chicken?
You expect anybody to go to jail for stealing barbecue chicken?
Well, exactly. I mean, but that's the point.
You're being silly by saying that. Because who would go to jail for stealing
But that is exactly the point.
But they said what they were, who wasn't robbery and everything. But we seem to realize that our own people sometimes do their own crimes. They go to other countries.
Ma'am, that's not the issue right now. That's not the issue.
No, I can understand. We can't do much with our own people, but we can do something.
But people don't have a problem with the restriction of the visa. What people want, I think people are trying to get is the right data on what is going on. If you have to give real facts and data, that's what some people...
Well, who say there is no data? It's because of the information that the government have that they implemented this visa regime.
Yes, the facts people are trying to get. Because
what facts do you want?
The facts on how many people, the guns, were they caught with the, all of the... People want to get... Why? We need actually the immigration officers to actually...
Why do they need to come to say that? The St. Lucia government is taking the measures based on the information it has.
Yeah, but as you take the measures...
ma'am, hold on a second. I'm getting a little bit intolerant to the nonsense that's being pushed out nowadays, that the government has to come out with everything. And that is being pushed a lot by the current opposition because they were in government at some point. And there is information, there is intelligence reports, there's information that's gotten from other friendly governments, there's information that's gotten from informants, there's information that you cannot make public, period. And I make no apologies for saying that. And the opposition knows that very well. Because they were in government and they did not give information to the public about crime and a lot of things. For example, let me just make it out there.
Then why is the United States, which is so much bigger than this, making have their...
That's not true. That's absolutely not true. That's absolutely not true. There's
When it's convenient, we have to go to the United States.
That is absolutely not true. The United States government has intelligence reports. The United States government has intelligence reports from its security agencies, whether it's the NSA, the National Security Agency, whether it's the CIA, the FBI, the ATF, or whatever other of its agencies. The United States government, whether it's the DEA, you think you get information from the DEA about the undercover information and all of that? No, you don't. Because if you do reveal the information that you have, inadvertently, you may be revealing the identity of persons. And it's time we get away from this nonsense that's being fed to St. Lucians, that every bit of information the government has about crime that it has to put out there. That is not the case. It hasn't happened in previous administrations, and it is not happening in this administration. There is information out there that the public will not be privy to, period, full stop, punto. That is a fact. Thank you very much for calling, ma'am. Now, what I want to go to next, because you see, you have to establish how people...
I think we need a commercial break.
Well, let's go to a commercial break. We'll come back with some more sizzling action.
Come to same old where we've got it all. Yeah. Supermarket, boutiques, gift stores, you miss nothing at the Hazelwood Mall. And we'll have a ball. Food courts like mom's home cooking. Come and see what you've been missing. Place at every turn you'll see. Every turn you'll see. Something for everyone, and that's a guarantee. That's a guarantee. Come and spend some time with friends here at the mall. Let's start it all. Come to Hazelwood Mall.
The Caribbean is our paradise, and nothing is more heart-wrenching than to see that paradise taken away. In 2017, we were helpless witnesses to the destruction of our beautiful islands, leaving in its trail devastation, despair, and even death. It's 2018, and Fast Cash is ready to face the storm with you. Get instant financing to prepare for the upcoming hurricane season. From the reinforcement of your home to purchasing equipment, supplies, or paying for your insurance. Whatever you need, our friendly staff are ready and waiting to assist you with one of our loans, which are instantly insured. Smarter, faster, better. Fast Cash.
From the lush green hills of Saltibus in St. Lucia comes a refreshing natural spring, bursting with extraordinary flavor and goodness. Filtered and treated at our modern facility to precise international standards. Bottled at the source to maintain its genuine as nature intended taste. And delivered to you in a distinct package to quench your thirst. Forest spring water, nature's own.
And welcome back, folks, to Keeping It Real, episode number 10. Can you believe that? It's already the 10th episode. Folks, we left off talking about the Venezuela situation and the government's decision to impose visa requirements on Venezuelans wanting to travel to St. Lucia. We've heard over and over again. And if you want to verify for yourself and get some information, the internet is replete. Let's make use of our internet, the data plans we put on our phones, or if you have a computer or a laptop, let's make use of that money you spend every month for internet service. Google it, Yahoo it, Bing it, whatever you want, Alta Vista it, whatever search engine you prefer. Search for Venezuela refugees. Search for Venezuela. Search for Venezuela economic situation. We have a call. Good evening. Thanks for calling Keeping It Real. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, good night.
Yes, good night, Mr. Ellis.
Good night, my dear. How are you?
Yes, not too bad, thank you. I'm listening as usual.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
These two callers who think they know it all. The man thinks he's the host of the show.
Apparently.
He keeps telling Mr. Norbert, oh, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me. They have to, if they want to make a contribution towards the show, both he and the lady, these people have to discipline themselves. You know, they don't listen. They want to say it all when they think they know it all. You know, and every time they call, that's the way they behave. But if they want to have an interaction with Mr. Norbert, all they do is take time to talk and then hold on and let Mr. Norbert respond. But Mr. Norbert is responding and they're going on and on and on and on.
But
they think they know it all.
But my dear, you know what puzzled me? This is why I said I made my comment to the gentleman. After all the news releases, Colombia has put on restrictions, Ecuador, and Tom, Dick, and Harry now concerned.
I've been hearing it.
The fact that Honorable Alan Shasney did it before other countries.
Countries, right.
They are trying to find a reason to denounce his actions. That's as simple as that. And especially some of those in Parliament who feel they're so bright, who feel they were so bright that when you remember the issue over $1 billion, was it?
Whatever it was, 1,000 million or whatever.
Chinese would come here.
2 billion. That's what was said.
And you see, some other people believe that they're so bright. You know, they come out with these things, and they don't understand. And they don't understand that when they were in office, there were things that St. Lucia didn't even know.
Really? Like
happening.
What are you talking about? You making that up, Mr. Endes? You're making that up.
Not even some of the cabinet people knew some of the decisions taken by the former Prime Minister. Grindberg.
Keep it real here. Keep it real.
Grindberg was one of them.
Really?
Right? St. Lucia didn't know about Grindberg. How many years it took for us to know about Grindberg?
You mean Dufali was the same thing too?
Dufali, you know? And so on. And you know, I really was disappointed in this gentleman because he's called the program several times and we have a good dialogue. But for him to object and come and say that Mr. Norbert did not mention a Caribbean island.
Right? And he mentioned Trinidad last week.
So should we wait now?
And he's going to listen to another radio station. Good for him.
But listen to you.
He won't be missed.
But listen to this.
Listen to you again.
No, but listen to this. Then the next argument will be, but they're only in Trinidad, they're not here yet. So are we going to wait until we overrun?
Yeah, and then the same solutions will complain.
Yes. Anyway, good job. Just continue, and he won't have his way on this show. He'll have his way on.
Nobody is going to have.
Not on this one.
Thank you very much for calling.
The show there. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Right, you too.
Nobody is going to have their way around here. I've made it very clear that the show is being controlled over here.
I don't think we want to cut people off from speaking because we want the opposition to have a voice as well. But if they're going to come up with some ridiculous,
they want to run the show.
They want to run the show. They want to run. Last week we had an individual. Come off, and he started off. Anyway, let's move on. We have other serious business, and it's now, what time is it?
12 minutes after 9.
12.
Yes.
After 9.
Now, we had the Venezuelan ambassador, Leiff Escalona. It's a very nice lady. And that was the day before Wednesday last week. And on the Thursday, we had a delegation, a high-powered delegation, who came to have talks with the Minister of National Security and the Prime Minister regarding all of what's going on. And that came soon on the heels of the St. Lucian delegation, which went to Venezuela, headed by Minister of National Security, Herman Gil Francis. So before the Venezuelan delegation met with the Prime Minister, they held a press conference with the Minister of National Security, and the Commissioner of Police was there, and a number of other stakeholders, the prisons, and I think somebody from Fire was represented there as well, a number of other government officials from Venezuela and St. Lucia as well. And the highest member of that delegation was the Venezuelan Minister of Prevention and Citizen Security, el Ministro de Prevención y Seguridad del Ciudadano, and he is General Endes Jose Palencia Ortiz. So the Venezuelan minister, let's hear what he had to say. Just stop that for a second there. The Venezuelan minister is responding to a question from Micah George of The Voice, and the question is interpreted to him by the interpreter, and he responds in Spanish, and we get his response. I'd like you all folks to pay particular, I will not lead up to it, I will not tell you what he says, I just want you to listen to what he says and compare it to what is coming from St. Lucia, a general from Venezuela. So you can hear the question that's asked in the beginning and listen to the response and the translated response in English.
Just a follow-up. The imposition of visas is a security issue. And I'm certain it was discussed with the Venezuelan authorities prior to today. So my question is that will it be taken up at today's meeting with the
Nosotros tenemos armas y drogas. Si quiere ampliamos.
Yo pienso que debe ser el ministro. Bueno, nosotros estamos prestos justamente para tocar cualquier asunto que estén contemplados en la agenda de trabajo. Esperimos justamente para eso. Y con relación a lo que es la parte de las visas, el Estado de Surinam es autónomo, independiente, el Estado de Santa Lucía es autónomo y es independiente y soberano, pues, en sus decisiones. Eso nosotros lo respetamos como Estado y, bueno, forma parte de los puntos que nosotros normalmente tomamos en consideración para esta agenda. Estamos aquí es para eso, justamente para tratar los asuntos que a bien tomen en consideración y sobre todo los relacionados a los temas propios de seguridad.
So, as I mentioned before, we are going to tackle matters of security. If that is one of the points that's going to be put on the table for us today, well, we are going to deal with that as well. We know that St. Lucia is a sovereign state.
You hear that?
They make their own decisions.
You hear that?
And we are really here to listen to you, see what are your concerns, and really tackle all matters of security.
You hear that? That was the Venezuelan Minister of Prevention and Citizen Security, General Endes Jose Palencia Ortiz. Do you hear the angle of Venezuela? The country that visa requirements are instituted against or placed on. Respectful, understanding that St. Lucia is a sovereign country and that they're willing to work with the government of St. Lucia in rectifying that situation. But we have our own citizens who themselves could be subject to or victims of crime relating to drugs, firearms, human trafficking from Venezuela. It is no secret, folks. It is absolutely no secret. There is a critical situation in Venezuela, economically and otherwise. Crime, drugs, human trafficking, firearms are a serious problem that is beginning because of the economic situation in Venezuela. People are fleeing. They need to survive.
Millions.
And how are they surviving? By dealing in drugs, exchanging drugs for food, exchanging firearms for food, and everything else that you can imagine. Human trafficking, prostitution. Not too long ago, I got a friend request on Facebook. And lo and behold, it was from a long lost friend that I had not spoken to and had not communicated with in over 30 years. And you know how Facebook is. Once you get a friend or two in common, you start seeing suggested friends. And people go looking after a while. You say, I wonder how, this person is doing. I haven't seen them. And you search for the name of your friend at school, whether it was infant school or primary school or secondary school, college, whatever it was. An old friend you met somewhere. And you send them a friend request. We've all done it. And I was talking to my friend in Venezuela, and I started getting the stories of what was going on over there. And those of you who know those students who were in Venezuela, why don't you ask them? Ask them why they were bawling and crying to high heaven to get out of Venezuela. Why don't you ask them? Ask them. Ask their parents, or the frantic parents who were bawling, insisting that the government do something to get their children out of Venezuela. Ask them why they were so frantic. Ask them. Was it because it was milk and honey in the streets over there? Was it because people could freely communicate or afford to make those phone calls or get on the internet or whatever? And just as a question, how many of you communicate with anyone in Venezuela? How many of you have received an email or a friend request from Venezuela or communicate via WhatsApp over there? How many of you? How many? So, for all intents and purposes, the situation over there is dire. And I don't see any reason why the government should wait until St. Lucia is under siege to do anything. I mean, policing, law enforcement, securing our borders has to be proactive. We can't wait until we have some serious problems. By then, it will be too late. It will be absolutely too late. And the thing is that, again, August the 15th, almost just a few days over 1 year ago to the date, that the Jamaica Gleaner had an article about the St. Lucia government considering imposing restrictions on Venezuelans. So, folks, 1 year later, it is quite clear that the government has been evaluating the situation for quite some time and has finally, because of the information, the concerning information that it has received and the evidence in St. Lucia, that it finally decided to impose visa regulations. So this was not something that happened overnight or 1 week ago. Here it is. 1 year ago, Jamaica Gleaner, St. Lucia to impose visa restrictions on Venezuelans. And when were those visa restrictions implemented? Just recently. So it means that the government has been considering this situation for the longest while. So, you know what, folks? Sepusa. That's enough of that. I am not going to get into this any further because clearly persons who are making arguments, all sorts of ridiculous arguments, just are doing so quite clearly for their own reasons. So let's move right along. Let's move right along. Moving right along. Soon after, minutes after the interview last week Thursday with the Venezuelans, Minister of National Security Herman Gill Francis was asked a question by the press regarding an incident which had occurred at the docks, the Independence docks, where Express des Îles, many of you know that vessel, that boat, that plies between Martinique, St. Lucia, Dominica. Much cheaper than flying, that airline. You know which one I'm talking about. And before we go any further, I have to let you know that long time ago in Bethlehem, I used to be an immigration officer. And being an immigration officer, I was a police officer. And just as a little aside, it's not really relevant right now, but way back when, more than 5 years ago, and more than 10 years ago, there was, and more than 15 years ago, more than that, there was talk, the consideration of moving immigration from the control of the police, because it was felt, and it's still felt now, and it has been felt for the longest while, that police officers would be better suited enforcing the laws on our streets and elsewhere in St. Lucia. So the whole idea of a border control agency and merging immigration or having customs take on the responsibilities and all of that has been around in some form or the other for quite a long time. In fact, if I am to be quite honest with you, at least, hear me now, at least 30 years ago. At least 30 years. Okay? So this is not anything new that's just suddenly on the horizon. The thing is that it just happens to be set in motion by Alan Chastney. So you can imagine why all the hackles on some out there are going up. Unnecessary noise. You know, the usual satellites. You all know where I'm coming from with this. The usual satellites. We know what to expect. You know what to expect. You know what to expect. Right? It's just like this friend of yours who, no matter when, what time of year, whenever you see them, they have some problem. Some family member sick. Somebody steals something from theirs. Their child in an accident. Somebody did this. You know who I'm talking about. That's right. Well, there are these people who it doesn't matter what Alan Chastney or the government does. If Alan Chastney wakes up tomorrow morning and says the sky is blue, they'll say, no, you lie, it's purple. That's what we're dealing with, folks. But anyway, tonight there's cricket at the Darren Sammy Stadium in Beausejour. And there are a number of persons who all of us have seen, and they work for free, folks. They're called volunteers. You have a special head of state, whether he was Taiwan, whether it's the US president, whether it's a cricket game, whether it's anything of the sort. There are St. Lucians who volunteer their time and effort to see that things go smoothly. And on the day in question with this situation involving the Minister of National Security, Herman Gill Francis, it was just before Carnival, and the Express des Îles arrived in the Castries Harbor to the usual spot at the what used to be referred to as, those of you who remember, the Banana Shed. Right, I see Mr. Ellis shaking his head there. You went to enough Queen shows at that Banana Shed, eh?
Oh yes, no, but I remember that very well. I think one of the
Did
Queens,
you take part? Did you take part in one of those Queen shows?
I was a member of the JCs. I was a member of the JCs in those days. JCs used to run the Carnival show.
Mm-hmm.
I think Heather Clark was one of the queens that got the
what are you talking about, like 1940 or something?
You might soon have to start to reverse the numbers. Instead of 18, you might have to. Instead of 18, you might have to say 81.
Okay.
In 1881. Nevertheless, I remember the banana shed very well.
Right.
It used to be cleaned. I mean, when the geese
boat,
they made sure they cleaned.
But you remember the times too when the banana production was more than the ship could take.
Oh yes.
And then you get the call.
The rejects.
You get the call.
The
rejects or the too much that's there, and people used to swarm the wharf for their free boxes of bananas. You just go and pick up a box or two if you could carry it.
That's right. You can take as many as you want.
That's right. That's right. So getting back, Express des Îles arrived, according to St. Lucians, load with Français, Martinicans, and whoever else coming to St. Lucia for Carnival. We know the French bands love St. Lucia. They got some good-looking French ladies. I know you like that.
No, I don't look at them at all.
You don't. Who do you look at?
Just the dresses.
You just watch the costumes.
The costumes.
That's the good kind of thing that you do. That's you're a perfect example of a fine gentleman.
That's right.
Right. So, folks, at the wharf on that day were a number of volunteers. Okay? Volunteers. And I just would like you all to know that I've conducted my own investigation into the matter. And as a matter of fact, I think with the evidence that some people have gotten, that they're being quite disingenuous in the statements that they've made to the public. And I will say it again, they have been quite disingenuous with the information that they've put out there to the public. Moving right ahead, and I'm keeping it real for you all tonight. There were a number of volunteers at the docks, at the wharf. And the reason why those volunteers were at the wharf, there was no cricket on the wharf. There was no jazz on the wharf. There was no public event or special head of state at the wharf that needed volunteers. But the volunteers do other work as well. They volunteer to help. And what they were sent to the docks, to the wharf on that day to do, was to assist with the large number of Martinicans who were coming in for Carnival. As a matter of fact, from the information I've received, the number of Martinicans who they were there to welcome to St. Lucia was approximately 90, 90, 90. Right? Now, folks, I know there are many of you listening out there who have traveled in groups or who have had groups travel to St. Lucia, whether it be exchange students, whether it be football teams, volleyball, whether it be religious groups, whether it be family reunions, whatever it is, you've had some interaction with them. And what happens, and I'm also telling you this from an immigration point of view, because I worked in immigration for a number of years, is that either you're informed by the government or the organization that has arranged the group tour or the group visit informs immigration and customs, or they come to the airport at the time and say, well, we have 25 students coming in and we'd like to facilitate that. Many of you have traveled, whether you travel to the US or whether you're coming back to St. Lucia. If you're traveling in a group, it is standard procedure that one person is the head of the group, and that person handles all the passports and the documents and the paperwork. It makes it easier. It makes it less chaotic. It allows one person to go ahead on the line and present the documents to the immigration officer. It makes things more orderly. And the thing is that if the immigration officer wants to interview or see a particular person in the group, a spot check, he can ask for that person to come forward. Folks, it's not anything new because I did it on multiple occasions. It's not anything extraordinary. The purpose of the immigration officer is first and foremost to be a diplomat, to welcome people to St. Lucia, because anyone traveling anywhere, the first impression you get of that country is your interaction with the immigration officer. Is that right or wrong, Mr. Ellis?
Yes, very much so.
And we've heard so many stories of St. Lucians who have traveled, who have met really nasty immigration officers in a few islands in the Caribbean and elsewhere further beyond. Is that not true?
That's true.
Right. So an immigration officer, by virtue of their place in line in dealing with a traveler, whether they're local or foreign, is the first image that everybody gets of St. Lucia. Right? So, according to my information, the volunteer, let me backtrack a little bit there. The vessel came in, Express des Îles. The vessel came in at about 4:15 p.m. on the afternoon in question. There were 90 or so Martinicans or Français on that boat. There were others on that boat as well. From what I understand, maybe something like 400 people, right, on that boat, but a large number. The 90 who had arrived in St. Lucia were met by the volunteers, and for some reason or other, it was taken an exceedingly long time to process for the throngs of persons coming out. And, you know, folks, I don't know if you've traveled. I'm sure most of you have. It doesn't matter where you go. When you come off the boat or you come off the plane, especially if you've gotten up early in the morning to pack and to get to the airport or the seaport and to go through all the rigors of baggage, and by the time you get to wherever your destination is, you're fed up, you're tired, you don't want to hear anything at all. You just want to go. And knowing full well what the situation like that can be, the volunteers were dispatched and immigration had been informed prior. The communications had been passed on. There were 2 immigration officers there, and the immigration officer in question, when approached by one of the volunteers, said, well, we have this group of people here. I can collect the passports, or word to that effect, and you could process it. That's the standard procedure. And the response of the immigration officer, the female immigration officer, was absolutely horrendous. Was absolutely unbelievable. And what compounded the matter is that now you have 90 people there who are trying to get out. I mean, you feel like you just want to escape. And can you imagine the number of people who were in that place there? And the noise, and you hot, and you've been, I don't know how rough it was on the sea on that day. You just want to get the hell out. And the immigration officer then said, according to the information I have, the immigration officer said that we're not doing it that way before, because the volunteers said that, but last year we did the same thing and we've been doing this sort of thing, because that's not the first time volunteers go to meet people. And the immigration officer said, well, we're not doing it like that. Everybody has to come up one by one. So the volunteers now, in trying to rectify the situation, to make it as pleasant as possible for our visitors. Remember, we're a tourist country. They're coming to spend their money here. They're a large group. It's nothing new that hasn't been done before. And from my information again, by that time now, when things started to break down at the arrivals area on the wharf, it was over an hour after persons had arrived in St. Lucia. Can you imagine getting off a plane or a boat and standing there in line at immigration, whether it's at UNORA Airport or VG or anywhere else, JFK even, for an hour and a half? You're going berserk. So a situation was developing there that the immigration officer could have exercised proper judgment, made a judgment call at that time, and decided that facilitating the group of persons who were there, who clearly had other persons who had been dispatched to handle the situation for them, to make things as smooth as possible, welcome to St. Lucia, was absolutely uncooperative. So as a result of that, and because of the situation, the long wait, the restlessness, if you will, of persons there, they decided to make calls to try to get assistance. Because clearly the two immigration officers there were not handling the large volume of people, of passengers. And you've come in on a plane at UNORA Airport. Sometimes the plane has, 180 something people? 200 people? One flight on the ground and you get into UNORA there and it's chaos already. You're spending such a long time there. So can you imagine the confined situation there on the wharf with almost 400 people there? Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? So what the volunteers did, from my information again, in speaking with the persons who were on the ground, they, because of the uncooperative nature of the immigration officer, they went to a port police officer, whether he was a sergeant or whatever his rank was, and asked him for assistance. But of course, he's not immigration, he can't do anything. And he himself tried to assist with making a few calls, calling his superior, trying to see if somebody could do something. The volunteers then tried calling the commissioner of police, according to the information that I have, and were unable to get the commissioner at the time. I don't know if he was at a funeral, if he was at a function, or whatever it was. They tried getting somebody else from the hierarchy of the police force. They were unsuccessful in doing that. So the next best thing that they felt they could do was to call the Minister of National Security. That's what they did. At that time now, another volunteer had come down because they had called and said, we have this situation there, we need assistance. The immigration officer was not cooperative. And I cannot understand why you would refuse to deal with a group in the manner in which groups are usually dealt with by immigration. Clearly, it was a trying and taxing time. I think that I would have been really happy if there were volunteers to deal with these people and just bring the documents up. But for some mysterious reason, the immigration officer felt that I don't know, I don't know what was going on that day, that she was not going to be cooperative, because nobody was asking her to commit an illegal act, to do something out of the norm, to invent some new procedure. All of that is standard. So the volunteer called the Minister of National Security, because in these circumstances, you try to call anybody you can think of who can give you some assistance. And again, according to my information, they got the Minister of National Security and explained the situation to him. The Minister of National Security did not call anyone because he had no way of knowing what was going on. He did not call immigration. He did not call customs. He was called. And as a result of what he was told on the phone, he asked to speak to the immigration officer. I mean, anybody would do that. If they called me, I would ask to speak to the immigration officer and say, "Hi, officer, we have this thing. Can you facilitate whatever?" But the response, which has been made very clear in public, was that, I don't want to talk to him. I don't want to talk to him. I don't have to talk to him. Folks, if that is the response of a police officer, an immigration officer, that they don't want to talk to the Minister of National Security, then what are you left with to think of that person's attitude to people who were there at the time at the wharf? Does that sound like somebody who's being cooperative? Does it sound like somebody who's being nice? Does it sound like somebody who's being welcoming everybody to St. Lucia? Welcome to St. Lucia. It doesn't sound like that to me. But then, you know what's even more puzzling? What's even more puzzling, and I will get to it after we play the tape, of the Police Welfare Association and the comments that they made to the press in public on the airwaves. Disciplined personnel of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. This is what they had to say about the situation on the wharf on that day.
It is important for us to understand that the police are not servants of the government at any level.
The Constitution of St. Lucia gives the Commissioner of Police the operational authority of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, and no individual, whether politician or otherwise, should use his or her office to influence or to appear to influence the daily operations of the police officer. Having consulted the officer and conducted our own investigations, we stand firmly in solidarity with the police officer and will provide her the necessary support.
We do not solely act at the behest of a minister or any political party, not even the party in government. We act on behalf of the people as a whole, and the powers we exercise cannot be restricted or widened by anyone.
We shall be writing to the Commissioner of Police, asking for an immediate discontinuation of this investigation, since the minister has admitted he understands protocols, and he claimed he understands protocol and the chain of command of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force.
You heard that, folks? Folks, this sounds absolutely ridiculous.
Can I ask a question? Did he actually get to speak to the officer at all?
Which officer?
The
don't
police
know.
officer at the.
I would suppose he got her version of what transpired.
No, but did the minister get a chance to speak? Since
He
she
never
didn't take
did.
the call.
She did not take
So
the call.
what is the question of influence?
Well,
where did he try to influence?
What they are suggesting is that the minister tried to influence the operations at the wharf by trying to give instructions to the immigration officer. That's what it implies.
But if the minister didn't speak to them at all.
But you see, this is the problem that I have with this. the Police Welfare Association is by design to see after the welfare of the police officers. And I was a member of the Police Welfare Association on 2 consecutive terms, or for 2 consecutive terms. And I represented at that time the largest section of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. And I don't know. I cannot understand this. That everybody believes nowadays that they have to play big and bad with the government or with ministers of government. An organization such as the police, a paramilitary organization like the Cadet Corps, there's a certain level of respect. And for some reason nowadays, people believe that if they are loud and bellicose, and if they can make loud enough noise for everybody to hear, that is standing up for their rights and they have to be heard. But why did this statement, or why did the Police Welfare Association have to be public? I was there when the minister was asked by the press, and the Police Welfare Association could have simply said, if asked by the press, and I highly suspect that they called their own press conference, based on how I see it being handled, that they could have simply kept it internal and say, well, an incident has occurred and the matter is under investigation. There was no need for all of this hullabaloo to talk. It sounds almost political to me. Like somebody flexing their muscles and say, hey, don't mess with us. I don't know where that's coming from. But if, as the Police Welfare Association has said, yeah, let's play it. Folks, let's play that again. You know, let's listen to the Police Welfare Association again.
It is important for us to understand that the police are not servants of the government at any level.
The Constitution of St. Lucia gives the Commissioner of Police the operational authority of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, and no individual, whether politician or otherwise, should use his or her office to influence or to appear to influence the daily operations of the police officer.
Okay, pause that there. To influence or appear to influence the daily operations of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. Did the minister try to interfere with the daily operations of the police force? And even if he had spoken to the immigration officer, you see, this leads one to question the discipline of persons. Because even if a situation existed at the docks and you're the immigration officer and you're maintaining that you're doing things by the book or in whatever fashion that you are implementing or conducting your duties, the minister of government, it doesn't matter if it was national security, so suppose it was the prime minister, or suppose it was the leader of the opposition, let's put it that way. Isn't there a certain level of respect that you're supposed to have? Right? Now hold on a second. You see, we have to look a little outside of things. If in uniform a police officer meets with a minister of government, he meets with a superior rank, he meets with a judge or a magistrate, he's supposed to salute. That's required. You're supposed to salute. But if you salute, what does that suggest or say about the person that you're saluting? Does that not mean the person is of a superior rank? Does that not mean that that person has some level of authority over you? So what you're telling me in essence is that if the Prime Minister of St. Lucia or a minister of government who, hold on a second here, let me just make it right to get people's lines straight, identifies him or herself and says, I'm the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, XYZ is the case. Are you going to now say to the Prime Minister or Minister of Government, I don't have to talk to you? Is that not insubordination? I want the Police Welfare Association to answer that and tell me if that is not insubordination. I want the Police Welfare Association to tell me that if the Prime Minister or a Minister of Government, and in this particular instance, the Minister of National Security, comes to police headquarters for a meeting or is at police headquarters for any other purpose and encounters that same immigration officer and goes up to her and says, I'm the Minister of National Security, XYZ is the case. Are you telling me that that police officer can now say to the Minister of Government or to the police commissioner, I don't have to talk to you?
That is why I asked whether the minister had any dialogue with the officer in question.
He had not. All she was told, you see the context of what was going on. I can come to no other conclusion, right? I don't know what was going on with her day. Maybe she was not happy to be there. Maybe she was enragée already that there were 400 people that needed to be cleared for whatever reason, right? But nowadays, people don't have respect anymore. I don't have to talk to you, man. Right? So maybe she was done enragée by the situation already. And just the mere mention that the minister is on the phone, who the hell is mate? I don't have to talk to you. But that is the only conclusion I can come to. Because if I, as an immigration officer, had been at the airport, had been at the seaport, or any other port of entry, regardless of the circumstances, and I was told that the Prime Minister or the Minister of National Security or the Minister of Health was on the phone to me, don't you think that it was an important reason for the Minister of Government to be on the phone and wanting to talk to you? Hold on. Don't you think that if the volunteers who were in the reception area, the arrival area for passengers, they were there unencumbered and they were not put out, does it not seem that these persons, based on your interaction with them, by not asking them to leave or saying that they were not authorized to be in there, that you accepted their position under whatever purpose they were in the arrivals area for, you believe that it to be legitimate? That same person is saying to you, the minister is on the phone, and you're saying, I don't want to talk to mate. I mean, where are we going to in this country? And right now, the police force is struggling with PR and the nonsense that some people are trying to make this political. And we know damn well that's what they're doing. We know damn well that's what it is. You telling me a minister of government is on the phone and a police officer is saying, I don't have to talk to mate? I mean, where are we going to in this country? I mean, this is absolutely ludicrous. And for the Police Welfare Association to adopt the stance that they have and making this more than it is, talking about the Constitution and talking about interfering with the day-to-day operations of the police force is absolutely ludicrous. Absolutely ridiculous.
More to it than that, because I'm hearing the details of the story based on your information for the first time. But what I'm saying, it's not the Minister of Culture or the Minister of Agriculture or the Minister of this, it's the Minister of National Security. Where does the police fall under?
Minister of National Security.
Say that again, please, because I didn't hear you.
Minister of National Security.
So the police force falls under the Minister of National Security.
Yes.
And the Welfare Association is saying they support the fact if that is the case.
That the immigration officer says she don't want to talk to you.
She don't want to talk to me.
Hold on. Whilst on duty. Whilst on duty. So you don't believe that the Minister of National Security is important enough, is pertinent enough, is important enough. I can't even find the words.
I can understand now, but if she spoke to the minister and she disagrees
with some order that he asked her
to
comply with, that's right.
And then the PWA
right.
coming up with that comment.
Hold on. Another aspect of policing. A police officer, and that is where I will support the police. A police officer is not obliged at any time to follow an unlawful order. He or she can refuse.
That's right.
Right? Hold on. He or she can refuse. If you have been given instructions, listen to this now. If you have been given instructions by your commanding officer, by your sergeant, inspector, whatever, and a superior officer to you subsequently comes along and gives you an instruction contrary to what your sergeant or inspector or whoever gave you, but a legal order, you have to comply with the order. However, you have to inform, or you can inform, your superior officer of what you were asked to do.
Well, you're going into the constitution of the police because I'm puzzled. I cannot believe it. I cannot believe this. I mean, I would think just out of basic respect for the national security,
at least you could take the
Minister
call.
of National Security,
and then you can say,
and you can say, sir,
this is beyond me.
This is beyond you.
I can't understand that nonsense.
You know?
I mean, you can say, yes, sir. He could say, XYZ is the case. Because under the circumstances, but hold on. Hold on. The Police Welfare Association now has the audacity to demand of the Commissioner of Police. That's what it says. It doesn't come across as anything else. It doesn't come across as a request. That the investigation into the matter be discontinued immediately because they have conducted their own investigation. Can you believe the audacity of that? This is incredible. This is incredible. Play that thing again for me, please. Play it again.
Sure.
Because you have to hear it. I mean, this is absolutely incredible.
It is important for us to understand that the police are not servants of the government at any level.
The Constitution of St. Lucia gives the Commissioner of Police the operational authority of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, and no individual, whether politician or otherwise, should use his or her office to influence or to appear to influence the daily operations of the police officer. Having consulted the officer.
No, they're speaking about some other occasion. They can't be they're speaking about something else.
How does what is being said there by the Police Welfare Association have to do with the situation as it unfolded at the wharf? How does what they say? This sounds as if the minister was calling to take over the force or take over the duties of the immigration officer. I mean, I'm amazed. I am amazed.
I saw the interview. I saw the press conference, but I didn't understand the details. But I am still asking the question: did the minister speak to the police officer?
Not at all.
So where is all this coming from?
my friend. Okay, so you see the whole because they're all bent out of shape because the minister said that there's a lack of respect or something. He says it.
And they're saying they stand fully behind the police officer.
Behind for what?
Before an investigation is done?
No, but the guys conducted their own investigation.
I see.
They've conducted their own investigation preceding the police commissioner, so now they are ordering the police commissioner to
disregard,
not disregard, to stop
an investigation.
Play it again for me, please. Let's not interrupt. Play the whole thing again.
Well, boy, I tell you,
this is incredible.
For us to understand that the police are not servants of the government at any level.
Really?
The Constitution of St. Lucia gives the Commissioner of Police the operational authority of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force.
It is important for us to understand that the police are not servants of the government at any level.
Let it play. Let it play.
That's one of the things I'm doing a Madao here, where you take it word for word, section for section, at any level. Is that true? I really would like to know whether is that true. I mean,
as far as I'm concerned, this is bordering on gross insubordination itself.
When you talk about servant, what is he actually saying?
But who said anybody is any servant or anything like that? Where is that coming from?
I thought servant relates to service.
But the choice of word is very interesting.
Yeah.
It is important for us to understand that the police are not servants of the government at any level.
The Constitution of St. Lucia gives the Commissioner of Police the operational authority of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, and no individual, whether politician or otherwise, should use his or her office to influence or to appear to influence the daily operations of the police officer. Having consulted the officer and conducted our own investigations, we stand firmly in solidarity with the police officer and will provide her the necessary support.
We do not solely act at the behest of a minister or any political party, not even the party in government. We act on behalf of the people as a whole, and the powers we exercise cannot be restricted or widened by anyone.
But
we shall be writing.
But let me ask you a question. That's enough for that one.
Where the political party come in there? There's something more to it than that. There's something
the
more.
Is very strange.
There's something
more.
Hold
on. So you telling me, because I've worked in immigration already, I've called immigration at the airport already, and they took my call. Immigration officers are there to render service. They're also police officers. They are police officers as well. And they're there to render service. And I find it very strange. You didn't get a call off the street. You didn't get a call from a random person. You got a call from the Minister of National Security, the minister in charge of the police force. And you tell me you're not taking the call? You don't know what he's saying to you? Now, let me ask you a question. You're left to wonder that if this is the attitude towards the minister of government, because whether you like it or not, the minister of government does carry weight. Because if you see him outside, you'll bloody well salute him. And under the police guidelines, if you don't salute a superior officer or minister of government, you can be charged. I mean, police officers have not been charged under those lines for discipline infractions for the longest while. But if you see him, you're supposed to salute him. So he's not an ordinary person. He is an ordinary person, but his rank by virtue of the office he holds. He's not an ordinary person. The same way how the commissioner of police is an ordinary person, but by virtue of the office he holds, you have to have respect for it. So how can the police commissioner have respect for the minister of national security, have to answer his questions, have to take calls from the minister of national security, but you who are below the commissioner can decide arbitrarily when you want, I ain't taking mid-call? How ludicrous does that sound? That's absolutely ridiculous. Now, if it was another day, let's say today or something, and the Minister of National Security called the airport or the seaport where that officer was stationed, and somebody else answered the phone, and he identified himself and said, I am the Minister of National Security. I would like to speak to XYZ officer. Would she also say that I don't have to talk to MIT? That's what I want to know. That's what I want to know. I mean, this is outrageous. So suppose the Minister of National Security now had some important national security information about somebody coming in on that flight or somebody coming in on that boat and wanted to pass that information along to the officer. Information that you need to pass on at the moment. Will she say now that I don't have to talk to you? So clearly, the attitude of there's absolutely no dispute here that any police officer has to respond to a minister or prime minister. There's no doubt about that. Right? There's no doubt about that. Are you saying to me now that anybody can totally disregard the minister or the minister of government? I mean, this does not make sense. This does not make sense. That is insolence. And then to be compounded by that ludicrous statement to the press by the PWA. I mean, you know, I don't know what else to say. I don't know what else to say. Anyway, folks, we've gone a little bit over time, and of course, me getting into my usual passionate self, but I mean, I just can't understand that. I cannot understand that. You make up your mind. This have nothing to do with trying to control the actions of the police force or individual police officers. I mean, when I was in immigration, if I got a call from a minister, I'd take it. That's happened many times. Customs would call. Somebody from protocol, from foreign affairs would call. I mean, it sounds to me like there's a serious breakdown in the understanding of what the responsibilities and the duties and the respect is with a number of people in the police force. And I make no apologies about saying that. I support the police 100%, but I think the persons who's speaking out there, as far as this is concerned, are totally wrong.
But you kind of wonder, but if what that same police officer or the police welfare association would do to someone who doesn't follow orders from them.
Well,
I mean, if they give an ordinary person an order to stop or to not to do this, not to that, and person disagree with them and ignore them, do not acknowledge the command, how they would act. Because I think there's something that, I mean, we have to do some re-education there of some sort. I am still puzzled at the fact that there was no dialogue between the police officer and the minister. For all of this to come out, making it sound as though the minister was giving her directions and she refused.
He hasn't said anything.
Maybe we have to know what investigation.
But listen to me. But we going back to what I said again. Even if the minister gave you directions which were contrary, you could have informed him at the time, or you could have said yes sir, or whatever it is. There's nothing demeaning about saying yes sir, because you say yes sir every damn day, right? As a police officer. And you would inform your officer. The minister would give you an order which you may, or make a request which you may feel to yourself is wrong. You call your superior officer. Whatever time it was, your sergeant or your inspector should be available via telephone. So I just don't.
Or you could even tell the minister, well, you know, why don't could you call the commissioner and let the commissioner get involved?
Right. But the protocol, I think what the minister was saying, and in the context of everything, that he understands protocol, is that he was not calling to give an order. And more likely, I believe, and tell me if I'm wrong, the minister was calling to make a request to facilitate the people there. He was, because he's not the one who made the call. A call was made to him.
You see, anyway, I suppose there's a lot more to come out of this. We'll have to get the details.
Well, let's hear about that. I mean, I ain't going through that again. I mean, this is just vexing.
Yeah.
Well, folks, thank you very much for tuning in tonight. This was episode 10 of Keeping It Real. 10 episodes. Is that a lucky 10? Is that a lucky 10, Mr. Ellis? You're not answering me. You're getting distracted.
I'm getting ready for my BBC.
Well, thank you very much, folks, for tuning in.
It's been a pleasure. I hope you have the Magnificent 7.
We're getting ready to roll out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Tune in next week. Same time, same station, 93.1 FM, for another episode of Keeping It Real. I'm Norbert Williams with you. Good night.